let's talk about policy now. This is important, and this is something I've been dying to get to on the show. Wish Crystal was here, but we should be able to, at the very least, she'll be on the show on Wednesday, 100%. Tomorrow, we're still working that out. But let's go ahead and begin with the DNC policy platform and its great big rollout. It appears that in the total shit show that we've already experienced right now at the DNC, getting our damn press credentials took several hours, much longer than it should have, and consequently, leading to a lot of the problems that we have right now. But what we could see in front of us is that they forgot to actually release the term, or take the term, quote, Biden's second term 5 separate times, Ryan, out of the DNC platform. So, I mean, Greg Price has circled all of them here in front of us. During President Biden's second term, they even refer to like President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris want to continue their legacy. I think this was actually, I know this is stupid. Like it was obviously like a mistake of an intern. I think it's a colossal mistake in that we should not be talking about Biden at all. Biden who? We need to get him on a jet and go to California. We're not talking about him right now.
What this shows you is the insanity of party functionality. Like, in order to approve the platform, you have to get everybody together. You've got the sub-platform, the subcommittees, the committees. And because they were rushing this so that they could not get Biden off, they approved this long ago. Like, this was approved a while ago. It was approved while Biden was still running for president. And so in order to get his name out of there, you would have had to reconvene the entire platform committee, and somebody would have to make a motion to strike his name from there. And I think basically nobody wanted to do that.
Yeah, they're just like,
they're like, do I want to be the guy that's
So you think this was intentional? That's even worse.
It's intentional in the sense that they knew that this was the document that they had. And they were like, we can either reconvene the entire platform committee, make that a news story, strike his name, and replace, Control F, Control R with Harris, or we can just take our lumps on Monday when this rolls out.
Because then you have to vote on it again.
Yeah,
right. They'd have to all vote
bureaucracy.
On it again. And then as soon as you are voting on it again, then you've got uncommitted delegates who are like, wait a minute, we're still in here like with this terrible Hamas and Israel provision. Let's revisit this. And so I think they were just like, you know what, screw it.
That is
just roll
actually
it out.
insane, because that makes it not an oversight. That actually makes it not intentional per se, but
no intern could
problems.
nobody's allowed to go in and change a comma in it.
But again, I mean, this is reflective of a bigger problem that they have, is that if all the polling that we look at, the more that Kamala is the change candidate and away from Biden, the better off she's doing. The more that she's tied to Joe Biden and all of his policies, then the worse off that she's doing. And that actually gets us, Ryan, to these economic proposals. It's been causing quite a stir online. It'll be fun to talk about here. Kamala gave a economic speech, what was it, on Thursday in North Carolina. Jeff Stein, friend of the show, has a few highlights here I'm going to read off of. Quote, $6,000 for a newborn tax credit. That's $3,000 for most children. $6,000 fully available to the poorest families. $25,000 down payment subsidy for first-time home buyers. A $2,000 annual cap on out-of-pocket prescription drug costs. Housing supply expansion credits. A ban on price gouging for food and groceries. That's probably the most controversial element we have. Eliminate medical debt. And EITC expansion, as well as ACA subsidy extension. So go ahead, Ryan, give us the leftist take, and then Emily and I will give us the counter.
This is incredible stuff. Right. And the virtue of it is that it does separate from Biden in the sense that some of this is new, like the $25,000 down payment, going after price gouging.
Sure.
It makes you talk about Kamala Harris distinct from Joe Biden. On a policy term, we can go through them, like the $6,000 newborn credit, like that's new. I
have not seen that from them. That's a new policy.
It's a derivative of the child tax credit that was extremely popular during the first year or so of the Biden administration, which cut child poverty in half, and then they just doubled child poverty by letting it lapse. People like that. I think what they learned from the 2020 Georgia Senate elections is that offering people money is a cool way to get them to vote for you. If you remember, they did that.
Do you think that still works in inflation politics? Before we get to that,
I think it does.
See, that's where I think the counter might be.
Yeah, that it's
is that given the inflation conversation. I'm by the way, I'm not saying it caused inflation. I'm just saying given that we have inflation.
That's the downside, but we'll see. I think the price gouging one is great terrain to be fighting on.
Interesting.
Because it puts the kind of right-wing national populism on the spot. It's like, well, you support. It forces. You support. It calls the question. You're okay with price gouging?
Well, okay. So Emily, go ahead. Give us the counter, because that's the one that I've seen the most like argument online from, right? So obviously there's been okay. So let's talk about what actually price gouging, what that means. So I had to do a decent amount of reading here in the last couple of weeks. Matt Stoller, as always, actually is a very good explainer on the difference between price controls, what price gouging is, and what separate proposals are. Now, Kamala was not specific about what a ban on price gouging actually would be.
So people like Post read into it. They projected.
I was going to say, I actually think it was I honestly think it was a mistake for her, because she allowed price gouging. And by the way, elements of some people in the GOP, like who's the senator from Iowa? He's super old.
Grassley.
Yeah, people even like Grassley and others are calling for breaking up meatpacking, right? Yeah. I mean, technically that is going after price gouging in the industry, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to break up the producer monopolies and
which are owned by
supplier monopolies,
by China,
which are then sold to the grocery store. There's been a lot of confusion about that too, because people are like, well, how could grocery stores be price gouging because they only have a 2 to 3% margin?
Right.
What I believe that they're talking about are the actual suppliers to the grocery stores themselves. It's not the grocery store. It's like the Kraft Foods, whatever that company is, I forget.
Yep.
That owns it. Anyway, so Emily, give us what you have seen, because I have not seen the right this animated about a counter policy issue in quite a long time. The price control thing really took off from what I could see. And I think it actually is going to set up for, this will be a real debate on the stage now at this point.
Good.
Because we saw Trump talk about this at the press conference as well.
Well, and that brings Ryan's point that brings up Ryan's really important point, which is that it actually forces the new right to confront this question of corporate power. And on the other hand, it's going to force the, establishment left that is now helmed by Kamala Harris, who is suggesting, anti-price gouging measures sort of vaguely. We don't know exactly what they would look like. The Washington Post jumped in with their editorial board and caught a lot of flack for going in hot. Not a lot of flack from everyone. There were some people who were really glad to see the Washington Post, some people in the tech community and the corporate community who celebrated the Washington Post editorial. So did the right.
Yeah.
And this is where the politics and the ideology, if we separate them for a moment, the politics and the substance for a moment, politically, it was absolutely 100% a gift to the right, because they know, and Ryan, you know this too, like, you can really fearmonger with socialism. You can do the same with capitalism too when you're polling, but the right feels like when they can tie socialism to Democrats in the suburbs, in places like Pennsylvania, in places like Michigan, that is a huge, huge help for them. That gets some of those skeptical Trump people back over on their side. They thought that in 2018, it was like their godsend. That's what they felt. Now you can, and in 2022, you can make a judgment on whether it worked, but they love that. They think it's a huge boost right into their veins when they can tie people to socialism. It can be really cringe when you're doing it. Like, it can be really, really cringe when you're doing it. At the same time, it is something that voters can look at and say it sort of is easier to build a narrative about someone being far left when you can talk about that.
So I have some polling in front of me that Matt Stoller had. So it says, using antitrust to enforce laws against price gouging and price fixing has a net 42% approval rating around decreasing inflation and others. I do
But
wonder,
it depends on how you're talking about it.
I don't know. By the way, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's why I do wonder whether it was a mistake. I'm actually curious, Ryan, what you think about this whole price control discourse, because there is one way, of talking about it, like breaking up meatpacking. I mean, people in the Midwest support that. Like, agriculturalists support that. Rural people support that. Do you think that the Kamala people made a mistake by making it seem like they were going to enforce full-blown price control? Because she hasn't even disavowed that, at this point. Politically, I'm actually honestly not quite sure. I'm pretty sure Crystal would support price control. I've been thinking about it. I just feel like
your guy
such
Nixon
a drastic. Well, okay, but that's what I was going to say. To me, it's a very drastic measure. I'm like, are we really at price control right now? You know what I mean? Like when we have the ability to if we break up meatpacking, if we look at some of the share buyback and other things that some of these companies have done.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So there are multiple states, including Arkansas, like red states, that have price gouging legislation on the books, which basically after a 10% threshold of increase of price requires the company to like file a disclosure with the state as to why a price in a critical industry is going up. And then people, I think there's some input process around that. So, I mean, we do have red states that are on the books that have these measures in place. When you put it that way, I'm like, yeah, it seems kind of reasonable. Like, if you have a critical industry or like food, meat, or eggs, which we all had that big egg inflation recently, if the company has to do it, at least they don't have to do anything. They just have to justify and explain, here is why. I mean, the other thing is, when you consider it, we give these companies and these food producers in particular, these people get a shitload of benefits from the U.S. government, right? Yeah. The Farm Bill is packed full. By the way, eggs are not supposed to be the same price today that they were in the 1970s. It's because they get all these subsidies. Yep. There's been, yes, economy of scale, et cetera, but these are some of the most subsidized people on the planet. Also, huge beneficiaries of government policy. So when people are like, oh, the government should get involved in prices, I'm like, we
already do.
That's what I was going to say. The problem to me is like, well, we already massively subsidize these companies. Yep. So, it's almost like the airlines. Like, well, should we really allow them to gouge us when we bailed them out like 15 times since 9/11? I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, we can either have laissez-faire or not. And, I'm not sure why some are allowed or not. In terms of the politics, I think Emily might be right. There could be a suburban backlash. This is also a decent test, though, of the does policy even matter theory. Like, will this resonate? Right now, it's elites who are arguing about it online. Silicon Valley venture capitalists
who freaked
about
out.
Price capital, about price controls, capitalism, and all that. Does that penetrate? Like, I honestly have no idea on this question.
I just want to say quickly, I think it was a mistake to not be specific. To
I agree
release
with that.
a really vague thing that allows the right to say, this is our new boogeyman of socialism.
Right.
But if she were specific, I think that would instigate a much more interesting, on the price gouging, a more interesting policy conversation.
I don't know. I think if you can bait the Republicans into defending corporate price gouging, then you're on good.
No, which they are. Some people have.
Some of them
you're
are.
right. Some people are like, no, it's we always have to let the market decide or whatever.
And I think that they lose that argument because I think that people are, in general, are like, when prices get too high, they want somebody to do something about it. And if somebody's saying, it's because of concentrated corporate power and we're going to police them, and that's going to drive down prices, you're like, good. Police them.
I mean, again, if we're not talking about price controls, we're talking about just breaking up like food monopolies. Yeah, that should be happening. I mean, there is I think, what is it? Cheez-Its and Eggos just got bought by, I forget, by like $33 billion by another major food conglomerate.
Yeah.
And what does everybody bitch about? Shrinkflation, inflation. Oh, the price of my groceries is going up. I'm like, well, yeah, why do you think? Do you think they're spending $33 billion of the goodness of their heart? No, it's because they want to roll it up into a larger company and then, increase the price and monopolize the profit and have economy of scale. The question is, as a country, considering again how much subsidy that we give to all these food producers and others, especially whenever it comes to meat. I mean, these are some of the most babied industries in the entire United States. They get so many carve-outs, cutouts, tax benefits, and other things from the government. Then why shouldn't we be able to say, no, you're not allowed to merge to each other and poke the consumer? That is different, though, from a price control, right? And I think that is where the conversation has to go.
The overlap comes in when the companies start to understand, okay, my price is a signal now to Lena Khan that I'm a monopoly. Because, there's a couple different ways you can raise prices, and one of the ways is by being a monopoly, not having any outside competition to jack up prices. And if a company knows, okay, if I do that, I'm going to start getting some antitrust scrutiny, then that factors into their boardroom decisions when they're like, what should the price of this be?
Right.
And when one guy arguing, let's do a 12% bump, it's like, okay, what do the lawyers think? Like, can we actually get away with that? And like, probably not. Let's do 7%.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on prices before we should talk about the CTC stuff? Though,
yeah.
Because that's probably the most interesting part, where you had JD Vance propose a $5,000 child tax credit. He actually pissed some people on the right off with that. And Kamala was like,
More
wait,
generous.
why not
How about
$6,000?
$6,000?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, and then Kamala's copying the tax on tips thing. But I mean, we could view that at least as a net positive, right? For some change between the two parties. Trump has not explicitly endorsed the $5,000 tax credit. I think he said he would consider it or whatever. So, but at the very least, the running mate has said it. He endorsed a $5,000 tax credit. She has embraced the tax on tips thing. So has Trump. So there is now, a pretty big change from, let's say, 2012 politics, where both of these would not have been proposed by, I think, a major party, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd have to be a partisan hack to see this as anything but an improvement in the political discourse. And hopefully it translates into policy wins for people who have populist inclinations on these issues. But yeah, to say that's not a good thing, where they're trying to outdo each other on policies that are positive for working people, like, that's great. I mean,
what do you think of that, Ryan?
Agree. Like, love that it's coming back. It got cut out of the IRA at the end when Joe Manchin was like, I'm not doing 3.5, I'll do 1.7. Figure out what you're going to cut. Housing and basically the care economy stuff are what got cut, and it plunged millions of people back into poverty, which is insane.
On the housing front, by the way, I think the housing part is very smart from the Kamala people. It's the first major proposal. But if we zoom out a little bit here, isn't the best attack from the GOP, hey, why didn't you do any of this, like, while you were the president or while you were in the administration? I feel like they don't even have to respond necessarily. They can just say, you have been the vice president.
Yeah.
You have not proposed any of this. If you wanted some of this, did you push for it? And what is it?
They had hundreds of billions of dollars in the IRA, and zero Republicans voted for it.
That's fair.
So they could say that's why.
Fair point. What about
and Joe Manchin stripped it out.
CARES Act? Was that which one was the first Biden? No, the American Rescue Plan.
American Rescue Plan. I think there was some. That was like a $2 trillion thing. There was some in there, but it was the IRA that had the comprehensive affordable housing legislation.
Oh, I think that, by the way, that's a fair and accurate attack, and retort. Go ahead, Emily.
Well, although Republicans would say it was loaded up with all kinds of, like,
green energy.
Yeah, they would say economy killing, like, green energy, blah, blah, blah. Inflationary policies is what they would say, just on a political level. But this is pretty, I don't know. I think this is, like, the central attack that Republicans have on Kamala Harris is, not just chameleon Kamala. It's really like, you were the vice president. You're telling people you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know how powerful of an attack that is when Democrats are doing everything in their power, except for on the platform, as we just discussed, to distance themselves from Joe Biden to the point where he's not even presiding over the DNC after the first night. I mean, it's not really that powerful when she's saying, I'm going to step in and be my own person.
Yeah. I think on the politics, well, actually, what's interesting too on the housing front, the attack I saw, which I thought was interesting from JD, I want to get your response to this, is he was like, so what did he say? He went, Kamala, she said $25,000 down payment for first-time home buyers. And the question that he immediately threw out is, he's like, oh, Kamala wants to build more houses for illegal immigrants. Now, you can say whether that's good or bad. If you want.
They'll be doing the building.
Yeah, okay. Well, but what I thought was smart is I was like, wait a second. Doesn't that just then force the question? Because she never said this is going to go to people on citizenship or not.
Yeah.
Right? But it would at least force the question of, like, hey, wait, does your plan apply to people who are illegal immigrants? And then you put her in a position where, if she says yes, that would be bad. And if she said no, then that would also perhaps spark a backlash on the left. So I immediately was like, that's kind of a genius attack, because she didn't specify. So now you actually have to ask the question around that and pivot to the immigration line, which is, of course, the best issue right now for the GOP.
Genius in that sense, sure. But I'm also, like, the GOP is going to want to have a response to that, because that goes beyond immigration on the substance of how to get more people in the first time.
I completely agree with you, and that is an issue that literally all of our viewers care about.
Yeah.
Housing is the number one issue for our viewers.
Well, but not just rental. Like, this question of being able to access the American dream by owning property and land and a home, and then being able to, you see this show up in polling of young people all the time, is like being able to get married and start a family. So many people see that contingent on owning a home, and that's like, there's so many different things downstream of the housing question that people on the right, our friends, have been talking about for a really long time. Absolutely. How do we get more people to own homes. So a lot of people say you just got to build. So the answer there has to be a substantive answer as opposed to a rebuttal. The rebuttal, I think you're right. There's a really smart way to go about it, but you can't just distract.
Yeah.
You have to also offer a solution.
Right now, the only retort I've had is, well, if you deport all the illegals, then the amount of housing supply will go up. And I was like, well, maybe they're right.
But then who's going to build it though?
What? American can build it. What?
Really?
Yeah, they don't take any money. They don't like money. Huh?
I mean,
you're proposing a housing subsidy. Why can't it go to them? I don't see the issue.
Well, first of all, I think Democrats have sold out on this issue. There's no chance that they're giving this subsidy to undocumented immigrants. That's just not happening.
You can rep the undocumented phrasing here on the show.
Absolutely not happening, because you need the documents to file your taxes to get the subsidy. So it's not happening. But also, yes, like, more housing is good.
No, I agree. I actually thought it was everyone was focusing on the pricing thing. Everyone was also focusing on the CTC. Yeah. The housing one is the one that popped me. And just because I know from when we do segments here on the show, it's the number one issue that we cover, which is totally uncovered by mainstream media. And it always does incredibly well. Because people are like, yeah, you know what? It's bullshit. Me and my husband, we just got married. We had enough for a down payment. Now the interest rates are up and the prices are still high. We can't afford it, And the mortgage payment is like triple or whatever what we had budgeted in our take-home pay. It's impossible. The more you start to look at that, I'm like, that, to me, if they could get some money behind an ad campaign or anything like that, even just talking about the issue, very, very intelligent. And to me, I think it might be one of the more popular elements of what she proposed. And the only GOP response I'd seen was on immigration. And,
we're going to talk about the protests in just a bit, but when you're struggling, potentially, you have this potential challenge in front of you with young voters. These are people that are our age, right? Squarely in our demographic. This is their number one issue, basically. It's student loan debt and it's housing. And when you can come with a $25,000 credit for first-time home buyers, I think it's really brilliant, and it's forcing Republicans to explain what they're going to do, which is likely, it's like healthcare, right? It's like saying I'm for Medicare for all, and then having Republicans be like, well, I'm for this patchwork of deregulation. You can't explain it in a way that is politically viable or politically superior to the average voter, because it's a pretty big solution for a lot of people's problems.
And what you hear as a counter is that, oh, well, this is useless because it will just raise the price of housing by $25,000. But you have to remember that not every buyer is a first-time home buyer. So economically speaking, the math should work out that it actually does for houses that are in the first-time home buyer range. It should increase the price by something, but not 25. So some of the subsidy will be eaten up by price increase.
Well, subsidies also work in different ways. If it's on a tax, they could apply it to mortgage interest or whatever. There's a lot of different ways you can implement this.
Well, and what does that do to supply? And it's just hard to know.
Didn't they increase his supply? They had a home builder credit that was in there as well.
That's what they're saying.
Look, we'll see. Again, do I think any of this stuff will actually happen? Probably not. Given the way that
quickly on Obamacare, they're talking about. So during the beginning of the pandemic, you had that. Basically the ACA was completely subsidized. It took what was a really crappy insurance program to a really great insurance program. That also expired when they didn't include it in the IRA. And now she's talking about bringing that subsidy back. And it's happening at the same time that Trump has been saying on his stump speech that he's not going to repeal the ACA. That unless he said, you've seen the line. He says, unless we come up with something better. And by better, I mean better for you, not for the government. So cheaper and better insurance, by which he means we're not coming up with anything better. So at minimum, you're going to get the ACA staying in place, and you may even get subsidies.
Interesting. All right. Well, she's got some policy proposals that are now out there. I would say, regardless of whether you agree or not, a lot of them net in the popular-ish direction. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.